today to Dementia Forward three-question podcast, and I am delighted today to welcome George Bartlett, whose mum is Linda Bartlett, and Linda is living with young onset dementia, which is a dementia that starts under the age of 65 years of age. Now, George's mum, Linda, was only 58 in 2019 when she was given the news that she had dementia. And, we normally think that dementia is something that only affects older people. But we know that every year there's many people of working age developing a young onset dementia. And we also know that services mostly aren't set up to support families with this diagnosis. And I have met Linda several times because she was part of our Dementia Forward's Young Onset Time Out Together group for a time. So if I just do a quick explanation, that our Time Out Together group is a group of people who live with younger dementia in North Yorkshire. And we've got three of these groups that meet weekly with members of the Dementia Forward team for full days out together. And so I was really lucky enough to meet Linda several times on these days out together. And I do just have to say that Linda is someone who, when you do meet her, you just don't forget her. She's got a really cracking personality and she's a very warm person. And what I remember about her is she laughs and giggles quite a lot. So I just really want to thank you, George, for joining me here today. Before we Thank you. Before we jump into the three questions, can you just tell me a little bit about the time around when your mum was diagnosed? What were the signs that you saw and how did that process, how long did that process take?
Yeah, of course. So around the time that mum was first diagnosed, I think I'd been back home for about a year after coming back from university. So I'd not really been around as much. But yeah, I remember things had kind of changed a little bit. Like there'd been a little bit, some differences in my mum's behavior and her not, remembering just certain things, just everyday simple things, which you do just kind of put down to people being a little bit forgetful and just, the normal kind of thing. I think one standout thing was that my sister had been in a relationship for quite a few years by then. For maybe 2 or 3 years, she'd been seeing someone, and she was then about to get married. And still, after all that time, my mum could never really quite remember Paul's name. So that was one thing where you kind of wondered maybe it's not, just a normal thing. Maybe it's not just forgetfulness. Maybe it's something a bit more serious. She'd also been out of work for quite a while by that point. So she left work. I think it was about 2014, 2015, because unfortunately her sister had passed away. And her sister was, her closest friend, really. And I think that was really a really tough situation. I think it did have quite an impact, on a mental health and just, really affected her. Um, so she'd not been back to work, and I think that again, that not being in that routine had its own impact as well. And she tried to go back to work to do some temp jobs, but it was quite difficult for her to kind of get back into it. I do remember actually one day coming back from college and mum being there and being quite upset because she'd gone to do like a temporary job. And she'd actually been sent home, unfortunately, because she just couldn't do the normal tasks that she'd been used to doing. And again, it's something that you can just say, you find an excuse and you just think, oh, well, she's not been at work for a while. Like it's normal and everything that she's been through. But it's one of those things, of course, in hindsight, you realize that you could see everything piecing together. So I think the diagnosis first came around when she was going to the doctors for something unrelated, just like a chest infection or something like that. And the doctor had actually asked some other questions about her memory and done kind of a memory test. And there are a few more tests after that, and eventually a diagnosis came about, which it was something in the back of all our minds, I think maybe some form of dementia. But really the one thing that stopped us from thinking that it could be anything like that was just that because she was so young. And, in our ignorance, we all kind of associated the dementia with people being older, which obviously we know is different now that mum's been diagnosed and living with young onset. But at the time, it just seemed unfathomable that she could be living with something like that.
Mm, yeah, I think you're not the first, George, to think along those lines. It's probably one of the last things that clinicians think of when a younger person goes to see them with problems with their memory. And I think especially as a woman as well, it can be put down to quite a lot of stuff, and we end up sort of bouncing around the system for a bit until, we diagnose properly what it is. And of course, all that time is like lost time as well, isn't it? When we could be sort of doing something, supporting the person a little bit more. So yeah, you speak, I think, for a lot of people who've kind of gone through similar to what your mum and your family has gone through. How has your mum's own life been impacted since that diagnosis, George?
Yeah, it's been impacted massively. I mean, obviously it was a big shock and something really upsetting when the diagnosis first came around. I remember one of the first things she said to us all, and she was kind of joking, but she was also, quite serious about it, was that she just said, "Don't put me in a home," kind of thing. Like, when we first had the conversation, and that's something we've always, tried to respect over the whole period that we've all been living with it. Because we want mum to be at home with us for as long as possible and to be happy and in her own an environment that she recognizes, which I think is really beneficial. So we've always tried to respect that. But it's impacted her massively because of her personality. Because she's always been so like fiercely independent. That's something that I've always kind of seen in her because she moved my family, we originally lived down in Dorset when I was first born, and my mum actually met my dad because she moved down there all the way from Yorkshire. And she just did that on her own when she was very young, when she was like 18, 19. She just moved down there to go and, find work somewhere, far away from where she'd grown up because she just wanted a change. And it's just amazing to think about that she took such a big leap and she did it on her own completely. And she did find some work and she, created her own life down there and met my dad and started a family and all these things. But then even since then, since coming back up here and um, since all the time, I've still seen that kind of independent attitude. Like she'd always like taking the dog out for long walks and just doing her own thing out in the town. And everyone in Tadcaster where we lived for a long time, everyone knows her really well and always recognize her as the woman with the dog lady. What most people recognize is her and the dog that she's always walking. And again, that's something that she had really tried to retain for as long as possible, even after diagnosis, is still, going out with the dog and still going out for long walks and, having her own time and doing
Mm,
her own thing. And it's really inspirational. It's been a shame to see that, not to her kind of lose that in a sense.
yeah.
There'd been I think it got to a head one day when I remember being at home and someone knocked on the door and it was a family friend who'd come and they'd just found my mum who had been down into town to take the dog out, but she'd kind of got lost and
Mm,
couldn't find her way back, unfortunately. And that was one of those moments. There are certain moments through this whole journey where you kind of stop and think, oh, it's got a bit worse,
yeah.
because you get used to the current situation and then you see those kind of milestones where unfortunately someone's deteriorated. Um, but she really tried to hold on to that aspect of her personality, and I remember seeing that the our dog that she always used to walk, who we still have now, he's a bit older now, but I, I'm sure in some way he kind of knew what was happening because the long walks in like the trails and countryside that my mum would go on, there would be like stone steps that she'd walk up, and the dog would actually slow down as she was kind of starting to struggle more with with walking those places, which is just like amazing to think that
Absolutely.
somehow
Yeah.
knew something wasn't quite right, and which I suppose makes sense with
Mm,
the amount of time that my mum spent with our dog. But yeah, I think it's quite nice that you mentioned earlier before that you remember my mum because of her like happy smile and laughter and generally how friendly she is to people. Because I think that's one thing that has never gone away, even now as unfortunately, she's not very mobile now. She's in a wheelchair now and it is for most of the day. And she's not as verbal now, unfortunately. You can't really have those conversations that you used to have with her, but she still laughs a lot and she's still very, very friendly. And, most people, well, everyone she interacts with, she always has a big smile on her face when she's speaking to them. And I think that's something that people see and certainly I see. And it's really nice that that hasn't gone. As much as there are times when she'll get upset, and obviously there are difficult days. There's always that kind of warmth is still there, and I think will always be. And I think I like to think that that's something that is spread to different family members and the grandchildren that she has. Is that I'd like to think that that's something that they've
yeah.
kind of picked up from her as well. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely remember Linda as being, I mean, Linda's about my age,
Mm.
and we sort of clicked when we first met each other. And And I gravitated towards her because of her warmth and her big smiley face, because you do, don't you? But I think you've sort of put your finger on something a little bit there, because people do retain their personality with dementia, and I think it's why services need to be designed around the person, doesn't it? Your mum is a unique individual and always has been and always will be, and therefore, services need to be designed around kind of your mum's wants and needs. And that was, at the time that she was in the Time Out Together group, I saw that personality actually flourish. She was a very sociable person. She loved to be around people. She loved to chat. She loved to listen to people, and that's the sort of person that Linda is.
Mm.
Yeah. So, how's your dad's role as your mum's primary carer evolved since this diagnosis?
Yeah, it's evolved massively. I mean, I think the key thing is that it's just become, well, it has become a full-time job, which it wasn't originally. He's obviously always been there since the moment of diagnosis. But at that point was still working full time. Um he was still working for the fire brigade and also did some like part-time labor work. Um and that's kind of obviously had to take a bit more winded down gradually since the diagnosis. So I think he retired kind of 2021 kind of time. Because that was just getting to a point where my mum was wandering more through the day where he was becoming a bit more dependent. Like she was still able to do her own thing during the day. At that point, she was still had a mobility and was still verbal in some ways, but starting to struggle with like making food for herself and that kind of and needed dressing at like kind of the beginnings and ends of the day. So just things were just getting a bit more difficult. So eventually it came to a point where it wasn't possible for my dad to then continue working. I think he said to me that he'd worked in the fire brigade for 30 years, and then being a carer is definitely the hardest job,
Yeah.
to kind of retire and then start doing that, which obviously he's very glad to do, and he's a huge
Yeah.
inspiration in that regard. But I can see, and it's only increasing how difficult it is because it
Mm.
really is a full-time job. There's no real there are, we try and make plans so that there is respite for him and some extra support. Of course, there's been gradually more and more support with carers coming throughout the day and micro providers and that kind of thing. But it really is a full-time job in every sense of the word because he does have to always be here in case mum needs anything. And also she just is very, he's the person that she's most familiar with in terms of
Yeah.
that person who's providing the care. He's the one who she's most comfortable with in doing certain things. And that's really important as much as it is really good to have those other extra carers. She's the one who he provides a lot of reassurance for her. But
Mm.
of course that brings with it its own kind of pressure, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, yeah. I mean, it's not just kind of the physical toll on the person, is it? It's like the
Mm,
emotional pressures.
mm.
So, even when your dad's kind of getting some respite and the micro providers are in sort of helping Linda with daily tasks, your dad probably can never really switch off from that. And probably the same for yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is really hard to. I think like one of the very few times where he's had an extended period of being away from mom was just this year, when my cousin got married, and he obviously really wanted to be able to attend the wedding, but that did mean a lot of people being here as well as the regular carers to come and look after mum, and it was only for like a day and a half or so. But yeah, I think that was as much as he really enjoyed the day and was glad to be able to attend the wedding. I think it was still very difficult for him not to be naturally to be thinking of how mum was
Of
doing, and I
course.
think he was checking in quite regularly. And yeah, I think it's that thing you can never really have that complete disconnect because you just wonder how she is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shout out to all unpaid carers out there, family carers, because I think unless you've actually been through it, you don't recognize how much of a toll it takes on your physical
Mm.
and your emotional well-being. So yeah, massive shout out to anybody out there listening to this who's doing this whilst they're listening to this podcast. But how you've got a family dynamic, George, and just how has this experience affected the whole wider family?
Yeah, I think that term family dynamic is key because it does have a huge impact on it. I think especially just in the sense of when you're in your, I mean, like coming to the end of my 20s, my sister's in her early 30s, and that's kind of an age where you don't really expect to be thinking about, losing your parents or, getting ready to lose your parents or anything. Obviously, some people sadly do lose their parents at a young age, but yeah, it's just not something
Mm,
that you really think about, like illness of that like severity. Um, so yeah, I mean, you just kind of expect them to be around forever, don't you?
you
So,
do.
but yeah, I think, especially in the way that the impact, unfortunately, dementia, the impact that has in the sense that they are still around, and obviously, Mum is still here, and she has been. It's been many years since the initial diagnosis, but you have to keep then getting used to the a certain kind of distance that parent has because they're not able to remember certain things. They're not able to do certain things that you
Mm,
kind of associate with them, or you can't have the same kind of conversations. And I think just gradually, um, those things change. And it's my sister Melissa. It's interesting hearing her side of the story sometimes because obviously you grow up as siblings, but you have different relationships with your parents. So she's said to me before that. Like one simple thing that she misses is that when she was getting ready for a night out, she would like text mum and like send a photo of what she was wearing and like say, "Oh, what do you think? I'm going out to meet my friends." And they'd have that dialogue, and that was, it was nice to hear. It was a bit difficult to hear as well, but it was interesting to hear that that's something that, she used to have, and that's lovely. And but now obviously it's not something that she has anymore. And it's something that she's kind of, even though mum is still physically here, it's something that
mm,
she's now missing, and that's really, I think that's what makes it kind of quite uniquely upsetting, living through dementia. So it has affected the dynamic in that way. And I think the other thing for my sister as well is obviously she's got two young children now, and I think it's been very difficult for her to to know that unfortunately their grandma won't be around for certain events, but and also just now that she can't really. She enjoys spending time with them and she's very smiling and happy when they're there, but I guess there's that thing of she can't quite be fully present in the way that she would be if she wasn't
yeah,
being impacted by dementia. And
yeah,
yeah, that spreads to a lot of things. It's like if there's anything in my life, like career or relationships or any kind of achievements or anything, it's something that I'd love my mum to be involved in. And if I like run a race or something like that, my parents are always there, but it's something that there's just a little bit of disconnect to where, my mum can't fully like understand what's happening. And, I spend a lot of time with them and when I walk into a room, I know that she's happy to see me, but you start to wonder more and more, like, does she fully recognize me? Does
yeah,
she understand? But I think you just have to try and, enjoy the moment for what it is. And we sit around and we have a good time and I just try not to get too worried about, is she fully aware of everything as long as she's kind of happy in that moment. And yeah, we'll just try to
yeah,
be glad
yeah.
for the moments that we have. Yeah.
Mm. You've got a real wise head on your shoulders, George, because no, you have really, because, your mum's only young,
Mm,
as I say, like I consider myself young.
sure.
Um,
Yeah,
and
as you
and
should.
yeah, and I sort of, my job here isn't done yet.
Mm,
You don't sort of think that you're going to be, facing an uncertain future when you're kind of in your late 50s.
no, of course.
And I've got kids who are just a little bit younger than yourself, and there is that dynamic. We've gone through like the hardship of bringing you up,
Mm,
and gone through all of the like early years, and now you're at a time, as you say, where the grandkids are coming along, and you can have a conversation in a bit of a different space. You can connect a little bit more as adults, and sort of lose that is particularly difficult, I think, for yourself and your sister. And then your life partner as well. We make plans, don't we, for what we're going to do when we retire. We kind of looking forward to the day when we've got a little bit of time back in our lives and we can spend a bit of time with the kids and the grandkids and we can go on holiday a little bit more. And have that kind of taken away from us is particularly difficult.
mm, of
We talk about older dementia, and that's difficult, but
course.
most people who are older have done all of that, haven't they?
Mm,
And it's harder. I think for a younger person, for many, many different factors, and that's one of the reasons why we're sort of running our campaign. George, I just really want to thank you for speaking to us today. It's really difficult what your family's going through, but it's so important that young onset dementia has got a voice, and for you to speak so openly and honest about it is fantastic for raising the awareness of this disease. And I'd like to end by mentioning Dementia Forward's Young Onset campaign. So this is a national shout out to all organisations and people affected by young onset dementia to join us and to become part of our voice for raising awareness of this disease and pushing for change, so that families can be supported more appropriately with young onset dementia. So if you want to be part of that, please contact Dementia Forward for any further information. George, I'm so pleased to have spoken to you today. I want you to send all of my love to your mum, who I will always remember as being a super fantastic person. And thank you so much for being a total credit to her and your dad as well, by being able to speak out about this and to tell it from your perspective, aside of this dementia that we don't normally hear about. Thank you so much, George.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.